This right here is one of my real life dividend growth portfolios, and as you can see through the transactions, I've been buying 1 to 2 shares of SCHD Etf on a daily basis every single day for the most part all year long. Now we can keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and as you can see, I have stuck to my word and bought so much SCHD over the last year to where at this point I built out a nice sized position across my portfolios. Now your next question is probably, well, how many shares have you been able to gather across portfolios? And to be completely transparent, on this portfolio right here on the screen, I've been able to get to 200, 157, and then in this portfolio, I have 114 shares. So just across these 3 portfolios, keep in mind I do have some other smaller portfolios with a few shares here and there. I'm up to around 470 shares of SCHD as of right now. Now in this video, I'm going to share with you on why I've been buying shares of SCHD on a daily basis and what my long-term plan is when it comes to this. Now, whether you own SCHD personally, are interested in the ETF, or anything else of the sorts, make sure to stick around because you are not going to want to miss what I'm going to reveal in this video. So for those newer dividend growth investors that might not be all that aware, what is SCHD, or the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF? Well, simply put, SCHD came across my radar being a 31-year-old dividend growth investor that's looking to get multiple things out of a specific investment. Now for me personally, I'm looking to get growth over time. Because basically as time goes on, I want my underlying investment to raise in value. And although I'm not looking to sell off the investment in the next 1, 3, 5, or 10 years, let's say, over time, I still want things to move up into the right. Now, on top of something growing over time, I want something that's going to pay me cash flow from day one. And when it comes to the SCHD ETF, it's currently offering around 3.65% trailing 12-month dividend yield, which, considering I'm buying a few shares of SCHD across my portfolios on a daily basis, that alone is adding quite a bit of cash flow on a yearly basis to my portfolio. But on top of my underlying asset growing in value over time, and on top of finding an asset that's also paying cash flow from day one, another very important metric to me is dividend growth rate. Now, dividend growth rate is basically how much in dividends an asset pays you compared to the previous year. And as you can see for SCHD, at least historically speaking, SCHD has paid more and more in dividends long term. Now, this is definitely one of the most important metrics because we don't know what's going to happen with inflation long term. I also don't know what my expenses are going to be in the future, but one thing's for certain, if I have more and more cash flow coming in, things should be quite all right. Now, over time, you're going to realize that a lot of different stocks across the market, as well as ETFs, have a dividend growth rate of somewhere around maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5%. And I would say personally, a good rule of thumb is anything that has a long-term dividend growth rate north of 5% is definitely something that should get your attention. So the reason on why I think that dividend growth rate, that simple metric, is such a cheat code when it comes to long-term dividend growth investing is simply because of this right here. If you look at this graph right here of every single dividend payment on a quarterly basis that the SCHD ETF, for example, has paid since the inception of the ETF, you can see one thing that's very specific. Over time, the SCHD ETF has paid more and more in dividends on a quarterly basis at a pretty impressive rate. Now, to give you a visual example of an ETF that does not have dividend growth, just to show you how it looks, the qyld, the global NASDAQ 100 covered call ETF, has been paying dividends on a monthly basis for quite some time. And here's every single monthly dividend that this ETF has paid since the inception of the fund. Now, if you go back in time in 2014, this fund was paying around 19 cents per month per share, 21, 26, and pretty much everything else in between. Now, around 10 or so years later, this ETF is paying around 16 cents per share, 17 cents, 18 cents per share. Now, keep in mind, this ETF has an entirely different strategy, and I'm not saying that this ETF in any way is even comparable to that of something like SCHD. But just to give an example, a visual of what a lack of dividend growth looks like, this is what it looks like right here. Now, I know what you might be saying, well, SCHD is not the only ETF that offers all of that across the market, and I would tell you you're 100% correct. But for me personally, with the amount of growth potential SCHD has, the overall index methodology, and the fact that SCHD's dividend growth has been very consistent, it's been enough for me to want to buy a few shares on a daily basis over the last year, which has now allowed me to build a portfolio of around 475 shares across my portfolio. Now, once again, just to be completely transparent, some of you guys might be curious on what my average cost per share of SCHD is as of right now. And as of right now, it's somewhere of around $68 or $72 per share, depending on whichever portfolio we're talking about. But overall, I'm pretty much flat on my cost of SCHD since I've been accumulating. And honestly, for me personally, since I'm still in the accumulation phase of this investment, I would not mind if SCHD traded even cheaper than it is as of right now, or even flat for a while, to allow me to get as many shares as possible at a cheaper price. Because as you can see, back in January this year, I was buying shares of SCHD for $75 per share. And then during the dips, I was buying shares of SCHD for $67 per share. So obviously, me being a 31-year-old dividend growth investor, I definitely want to buy shares cheaper, as that's going to give me a higher yield on cost, and of course allow me to accumulate more shares at a quicker rate. So as of right now, I currently have around $33,000 to $34,000 invested into SCHD, and I thought it would be fun to go ahead and type in all of my current shares of SCHD into the dividend calculator. Now my starting principal is around, again, 475 shares of SCHD, and I'm pretty much flat on the cost. The initial annual dividend yield is around 3.7%, and the expected annual dividend amount increase is around 8%. Again, it could be more or less in the future, but let's just go with that. The expected annual share price is around 3%. We have a $100 annual contribution, so this is basically saying that I'm going to add mostly nothing more from what I have right now. Now, dividend reinvestment is going to be turned on for this example, but let's see what we would get by the time I'm 61 years old, if I were, for whatever reason, never to buy another share from here, which of course I'm going to. Now you can see year number one, this is where I'm at currently. I'm earning around $1,256 per year in dividends. And if I was to reinvest all these dividends into more SCHD by year number two, I'd be earning around $1,400 per year in dividends. Now, if we were to skip ahead a little bit, by year number 10, if I was to never buy another share of SCHD and just let my shares of SCHD basically buy me more shares from the dividends, by 10 years from now, I'd have a $62,000 portfolio and around $3,600 per year in dividends. By year number 20, if I was to never buy another share and just do what we said, this portfolio would be valued at around $151,000. And by this point, I'd be 51 years old. And with those shares of SCHD, I'd be making around $14,200 per year in dividends. Now, by year number 25, by this point, I'd be 56 years old. I would have $265,000 worth of SCHD and $32K per year in dividends. And all the way at the bottom, once the compounding machine really kicks into gear, we're looking at $519,000 of SCHD and $80,000 per year in dividends. And at this point, I'd be 61 years old. Now, just for the fun of it, I've been buying around 2 shares of SCHD across my portfolios on a daily basis this year so far, more or less. And because 2 shares of SCHD as of right now cost around $140, and there's around 250 something days in the trading year, if we were to add $35,000 of annual contribution and keep doing this ongoingly, so once again, just to repeat, if I were to keep doing exactly what I'm doing every single year until I'm 61 years old, let's see what we would get then. Well, this really changes things because once again, we have a massive annual contribution, which is what I've been doing as of recently. We start off with our current shares of SCHD, which are paying us around $1,200 per year. But year number 2, after that massive contribution, and also after those dividends that were reinvested, we're already to $71,000 and $2,800 of annual dividends. By year number 3, $111,000 and $4,600 per year in dividends. Now by year number 10, almost $500,000 and $28,000 per year in dividends. So at this point, I'd be 41 years old. Let's see where we would be by the time I'm 51 years old. $1.75 million and $164,000 per year in dividends. And by 30 years from now, if I would just continuously buy 2 shares of SCHD per day, and again, this is all just in theory, just going off of the numbers, this is by no means extremely accurate. But just to give us all an idea of how the compounding machine works, we'd be at $6.6 million and $1 million plus per year in dividends. Now I share this with all of you because I definitely, for one, recommend you all mess around with the dividend calculator. They're free online. Just Google dividend calculator and mess around with different scenarios to see where you can land when it comes time to retire. On top of that, I wanted just to share with you all the hard work that I've been doing over the last year to hopefully motivate some of those investors out there that might be on the fence. But when it comes to a daily purchase of an ETF stock or any asset for that matter, I want to hear from you guys down below. Is there a current stock or ETF that you buy consistently like I do with SCHD? If so, drop the ticker symbol in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like and subscribe for more. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.